Being very entitled and controlling, narcissists have no difficulty stepping all over your personal boundaries. So that's why I put together an extensive video class called This Is Me. It has 25 videos, written documents, guided questions. I'm going to teach you how to have healthy boundaries. There's a link below, and I hope you'll find it to be quite therapeutic. One of the most telling ways to determine how strongly a person has gone down the path toward their own narcissism is to watch how they manage themselves when it comes to their sexuality and their sexual experiences with other individuals. I cannot even tell you how many times I've spoken with individuals who've had relationships completely come apart because of sexual mismanagement. And when I talk about that, I'm basically saying that you've been on the receiving end of some sort of gross exploitation or manipulation. You've been harmed. A person has been very dishonest or secretive relative to sexuality. And I want us to learn how to get into the mindset of the narcissist so we can understand what's going on relative to their approach towards sexuality, because certainly that's not something that you want or deserve from anyone in any kind of way. Now, let's start by saying, at its best, sexuality creates bonds of affirmation. Sex can be a good thing when it's managed in the right context. It represents a form of loyalty and devotion. It sets up a relationship to be unique and distinct in a very healthy and loving kind of way. That's what we want to think of when we think of sexuality. But then enter the narcissist with all of their need for affirmation and control, and they want to be superior, and they use people and manipulate people. When they approach individuals with their sexual mindset fully intact, there are a couple of very strong primary ingredients that you'll see right up front. And that is, number one, they're very willing to exploit. In their mind, they're thinking, how can you gratify me? There's no particular regard for the other person beyond whatever their short-term utility might be. And then in addition, narcissists, when they approach sexuality, have a very strong lack of what we would call future thinking. In other words, where's this going? And what's going to be the net result of us being involved in this way with one another? They don't think about it. All they're thinking about is whatever goodies they hope that they're going to gain in the moment, or power, or whatever. And when we talk about narcissists approaching sexuality in ways that can be harmful, there are a myriad of ways and scenarios where this can play out. Now, obviously, this can be seen inside of dating scenarios where there's excessive flirtation and titillation, and you're there for their jollies only. They don't really care about the psychological impact on you during that. Sometimes sexual impropriety happens inside a marriage or a long-term committed relationship where it's weaponized, and there's an attitude of entitlement that goes along with that. Certainly, we know that narcissism, it comes into play when people are very willing to step outside of their marriage, particularly on a repeated or a long-term kind of basis, where they have a commitment supposedly over here, but then they are willing to keep secrets and do things behind the scenes over there with affair partners. And then I guess the worst that we can say, the worst that we can say is when men and women, and more often than not it's men, will sexually abuse children. And there's hardly anything that's lower than that, where somebody has a sexual drive and craving, and they take it out on innocent victims. And I know that many of you have been involved with behaviors that involve that, and I'm so deeply hurt when I hear stories relative to that. Now, there are major components that I want us to be aware of that go into play with narcissists as they exploit and use individuals sexually. Let's run through some of the things that go hand in hand with this. First, when narcissists approach another individual sexually in that manipulative way, they ignore the heart. of that other individual. When we say that narcissists have low empathy, when it comes to sexuality, it's like it doesn't exist. Your feelings don't register beyond them trying to butter you up, perhaps, maybe, and make you feel special in the moment. But it's like, make no mistake, they do not care about your heart, particularly in any kind of long-term kind of way. That's that absence of future thinking. In addition, with narcissists, sex can be a right. It's what I want. This is what I deserve. And it's not tied to any particular deeper meaning. Like I say, sex in its proper context can be extremely meaningful. And the narcissist is thinking, I don't want to be the second coming of some sort of philosopher. Just give me what I want. This is what I deserve. And they just look at it as their right, something to go get. Likewise, with narcissists, you'll have very little, if any, discussion or planning with respect to where sexuality fits in the context of the relationship. It's like, do we have to talk about stuff like that? I don't want to do it. No, let's just go do what we want to do. And there's no sense of purpose. There's no root system that goes along with it. And as a therapist, I know that sexuality is not just about sex. It has so much to do with your position in the community, or your management of emotions, or overcoming certain needs that could be legitimate. But with narcissists, there's so many needs that are attached to it. In addition, we can say that narcissists will see sexuality as a form of conquest, notches on the belt, if you will. And many times sexuality has a very strong power dynamic in the way that they do things. What this means is, I've conquered you. You're now mine, and I own you, and I've got a piece of you. And that's how they tend to think. And by the way, this can happen with men, but it can also happen at times with women. With narcissists, they view sexuality as mainly a fix for whatever need they have in the moment. They tend to carry a lot of loneliness. They tend to carry a lot of emptiness on the inside, and sexuality gives them a temporary fix for that. Now, by the way, that's something that they will hardly ever admit. I remember talking with a man who'd had multiple affairs, and I mentioned something to the effect of the emptiness that must have been on the inside, the loneliness, and he just looked at me and said, "You got that wrong, Doc. I don't have that problem." And I'm thinking, no, I did not get that wrong, dude. And but they see sexuality as being something that's going to fix some sort of emptiness or hurt or need on the inside. They see sex as a compensation for other personal issues. Maybe they've had a history of broken relationships and they're trying to make up for lost time. Maybe they just have impatience regarding the way that relationships unfold. They don't want to have to wait and allow the relationships to come to them. Narcissists tend to be very impatient with respect to that. Maybe they've had bad marriage or dating experiences elsewhere, or maybe they're in rebellion against some system of authority that they've lived inside of, but often their sexuality is tied to those kinds of drivers. Ultimately, with narcissists, the ego and the need of the moment is what matters most. They're very shallow in their approach toward that. It's all about whatever jollies they're wanting to gain in the moment. And then especially when there's an abusive element to it, to the narcissist, it's sad to say, you mean nothing. You are irrelevant beyond the act that they're wanting to perform with you, and they have no interest in your concerns. And so when you take a look at narcissism, and then you add the whole notion of sexuality, it is a grounds for all sorts of dysfunction. And the narcissist, because they tend to have such low personal reflection skills, they can just do their thing and then move right beyond you. And you're over there just lying in the ditch thinking, what in the world happened to me? I'm hoping that if you have ever been on the receiving end of a narcissist, exploitive attitude with sexuality, that there are certain things that you'll allow yourself to go back to so that you can reclaim what's best and right about you. Now, first and foremost, if you have been on the receiving end of a narcissist manipulations, make sure you go back to your basics. Ask yourself, why does sex matter in my life? How does it fit into my overarching understanding of what it means to have a good relationship or a good life? And no one can force that kind of thinking onto you. That's something that requires you to think from the inside out. Know who you are, know what you believe, and know what your values are relative to that. And then if you've been abused, let me just go ahead and say you're not required to stay silent. It may be that you'll confront the person who did the abusing sexually. It may be that you'll bring in other accountability factors, and sometimes you'll need a therapist to help you unpack all of that, but you don't have to protect somebody who's been exploitive toward you. Know your boundaries. And keeping in mind that boundaries goes to what I'm talking about here. You have a definition of who you are, and you're going to stay inside that definition of who you are. And then when they want to blow back past your boundaries, double down on your boundaries anyway. Watch for red flags. Somebody that's too insistent, somebody that's too impatient regarding their having their sexual needs met. That's a huge red flag. I'll hear people say, well, I've dated a whole lot of people, and you know that they've had many different partners, and what that tells me is I just run through people. I wear people out. Listen for the red flags. Or if somebody says, well, I was unfaithful in past relationships, do you think that you'll be different? Why would you think that you'll be different? And just don't just assume that things are going to be okay. Listen to what your heart, listen to what your gut, listen to what the facts tell you, as opposed to what their sweet words might be. And then ultimately, remind yourself that sex is an extension of kindness and healthy loyalty and devotion and heart connection. So let me reiterate, you can learn a whole lot about a person's level of maturity by watching how they manage themselves sexually. What is this person revealing about himself or herself if they come toward you with this exploitive attitude? And then how does what you learn about them match pitch with what you know about yourself? You'll have to be the one to decide that, because that exploitive narcissist, that ain't in the cards for them to be that way. Practice self-care. Now, I hope this gives you some good things to reflect upon. If you've not already done so, I'd encourage you to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button too, and we'll keep more videos coming toward you. And I hope that as you watch these videos in a cumulative fashion, it can assist you in your growth process. Likewise, I mentioned if you have a need for therapy, please know that I'm sponsored by the people at BetterHelp.com. I have for years, and we've received very good feedback from that. Online therapy became really popular during the pandemic, and people have realized, hey, this has some real merit to it. And so we have a whole team of licensed professional therapists that you can select from. You go through the link that we provide below. You get a 10% discount on the first month. Likewise, we have my therapeutic courses, and each of these is very extensive. It's signing up for an online class. And as you take the course, you know, you'll have many videos, like 25. Each one of them has written documents that go along with it with guided questions. I would encourage you to go toward that. We have Ready, Set, Connect about making healthy connections. This is me about establishing those boundaries, Free to Be, finding yourself despite those controllers. We also have my webinars that I presented. We have and you can still purchase those on our website. We have my website with many articles. We have our podcast, my books, lots of resources. Okay, sexuality is a place where you can tell a lot about a person's maturity or lack of. And as narcissists begin showing you, where they're coming from relative to that, take note. And then, like I say, make sure that it matches pitch with where you are. And if it doesn't, then it's like, I've got to practice self-care, because they're not going to care for me. That's for sure. Let's remember that here on Team Healthy, we stand for dignity, respect, and civility. And it starts with you knowing that about yourself, and then connecting with other individuals who can share with you in that kind of mindset. And if you do, then that allows you to be a person that's more and more capable of finding your own inner peace.